In God's works, he often takes what's small and insignificant and he makes it something great. And we saw this with the town of Bethlehem. It was a small, insignificant town, and now it's one of the most visited places in the world. This was God's promise to the Israelites, too, that he would make them a great nation. And according to Isaiah in the first reading, the glory of the Lord would shine upon them. They'd be a light to the other nations living in darkness, and all the nations would come to praise the God of Israel. Well, this is a Christmas prophecy. The glory of God we know is Jesus, and the light of Israel is Jesus. In fact, Israel, they can't be a light without Jesus. The light of Christ, it illuminates Israel, and it changes Israel into the light for the world. And if you think about light, one quality of light is that it's attractive. It draws things to it. And this is something that attracted the shepherds and the Magi, the light of Christ. They walked a long distance just to see Jesus. They came to worship and adore him and give him praise, or give praise to God by offering Jesus gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And it's always interesting to me to look at how this story unfolds. The Magi, they came from one direction, but then after they encountered Jesus, they returned home a different way. Now, obviously, this was because of the danger of Herod. Herod was looking for the child Jesus, and he wanted to put him to death. But some theologians also see this as an interior change that took place after the Magi encountered Jesus. And if you think about it, this makes sense. We're talking about light. And light, it changes things that it comes into contact with. For example, in a dark room, light, it illuminates objects and eliminates darkness. On the beach, the light of the sun can change the color of our skin. I get pretty red if I go to the beach. And then this light also, when it's magnified, it can cause a fire. Well, a similar thing happens when we're close to Jesus. We're changed. Saint Irenaeus, he said that those who are in the light of Christ do not illuminate the light, but are illuminated and enlightened by it. But there can also be an opposite reaction. For some, the light illuminates them. For others, they may be in such great darkness that the light's blinding, and it's difficult for them to be in its presence. Think about when you wake up in the morning. That first light, it can be difficult to see if you're in total darkness. It takes time for us to adjust. But eventually, little by little, our eyes get used to the light. Well, in the gospel, Herod, he was someone who didn't take time to adjust to the light of Christ. He saw Jesus as a threat to his kingdom, and he wanted to eliminate him. Herod, he was really his worst enemy. He was a threat to himself and God's plans for him. When you think about it, Jesus, he was never really a threat to Herod's physical kingdom. Although depending on how you look at it, we could say that he was a threat to his spiritual kingdom. Because Jesus, he came into the world to save us. But we can only be saved when we put Christ at the center of our lives. And for Christ to reign in our lives, we have to fight against sin and overcome ourselves. It really requires a change of heart, and that's something that's not always easy. We're not always open to it. And some of this is because when we don't understand something, it can seem like a threat. In this case for Herod, he didn't understand the child Jesus. He heard rumors about Jesus being born, and so he saw it as a threat. And he didn't take the time to truly understand him and to seek him like the Magi did. For him, he already made up his mind, and nothing that Jesus could do would have changed that. Well, that's easy for people to do today. Sometimes we can form our own ideas about God and the church without taking time to grow in our relationship with God and without taking the proper time to study and learn about prayer and learn about the sacraments. Someone like this, they have no interest in learning about God because they've already made up their mind about who he is and what his church represents, and nothing will convince them otherwise. They've got it all figured out. But the Magi, they were a little different. They were humble. They went to seek Christ. They were guided by God to this place where they could encounter the King of Kings. And their lives were never the same afterward. What's interesting is that the gifts that they brought, as I was saying earlier, they teach us something about Christ. They reveal certain qualities about him. The gold, it reveals that Jesus was a king. The incense, well, that was something that was used in the temple as an offering to God. And so it reveals the divinity of Jesus. And then myrrh, it was used for bodies after death. And so this reveals that Jesus, obviously he's a man, but it's also a symbol of his own death. And so these gifts, along with the scriptures, they show us that Jesus wants to be the king of our lives, that he's God, and that he died to save us. And this is fascinating because this shows us that the birth of Christ, it really points to the death of Christ, which was his reason for coming into the world. During the Christmas season, we heard the story of the birth of Christ throughout those Christmas liturgies. But for us, the story doesn't end there. We have to walk with Christ from his birth to his death so that his life can become our lives. According to Pope Francis, it's not enough to know where Jesus was born, like the scribes, if we don't go there. It's not enough to know that Jesus was born, like Herod, if we don't find him. When his place becomes our place, when his time becomes our time, when his person becomes our life, then the prophecies are fulfilled in us. Then Jesus is born in us. He becomes the living God for me. Today we're asked to imitate the Magi. They didn't argue, but they set out on their journey. They didn't stop to look, but they entered the house of Jesus. They did not put themselves at the center, but prostrated themselves before the one who is the center. Every day, brothers and sisters, Jesus, he's revealing himself to us. And we can choose to make Jesus the center of our lives or not. If we don't, then we'll live in darkness. We'll be like Herod. Without Jesus, his life was disordered. He didn't trust anyone, and he was paranoid, and we know from history that he killed a lot of people because he was afraid of losing his power. But with Jesus, prophecies are fulfilled in us, or God's promises, they're fulfilled in us. We receive new life through Christ, and it's a life without sin. And it's full of all of those markings of the Holy Spirit. It's filled with love, with joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The light of Christ, it enlightens our minds if we make him the center of our lives. And it's through Christ that God takes the little that we are and he makes us great. He transforms us into saints and lights for those who continue to live in darkness.